After the passing of Nuh, peace be upon him, the earth lay silent for many days. The winds carried the scent of fresh soil, and the mountains echoed with the cries of his sons as they prayed over their father's resting place. It was as though the very world paused in mourning for the man who had bridged two ages, the age before the flood and the age of rebirth. Then, slowly, life resumed its rhythm. The rivers swelled with rain, the forests deepened, and the plains grew rich again. The families of Nuh, his sons, and their descendants began to multiply, spreading across the land in search of homes, water, and peace. The world that had once been one valley now became vast with tribes and tongues. The line of Shem, or Shem, the keepers of light. Shem, the eldest, was known for his wisdom and calm heart. He carried the covenant of his father like a flame in his chest. His people settled between the mountains and the Fertile Crescent, the lands that would one day be called Babylon, Assyria, and Aram. They built villages near rivers, planted gardens, and raised simple altars of stone where they offered thanks to the one God. Shem taught his children the language of remembrance, a tongue of clarity and reverence, where every word began with the name of their Lord. Among his descendants were the ancestors of prophets who would come long after: Ibrahim, Musa, Dawood, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all. They became the people of the promise, the guardians of revelation. From their line, the torch of guidance would pass through the centuries, lighting the path for mankind whenever darkness grew thick. Shem's tribe built houses of clay and brick, strong yet humble. They learned to measure time by the moon and the stars, and to preserve memory through spoken word. Each evening the elders would gather the children and recount the story of their forefather, how Nuh called his people for 900 years, how the flood came, and how mercy triumphed. And every generation would repeat the same prayer: O Lord of Nuh, keep our hearts from drowning in pride. The line of Ham, or Ham, the children of the sun. Ham, bold and restless, loved the warmth of open skies. His people journeyed southward, through valleys glowing with gold and rivers wide as seas. They crossed lands of palms and deserts, finally settling in regions of abundance, the lands that would become Egypt, Nubia, and the coasts of Africa. They became farmers, builders, and sailors, the first to master the tides. The Nile and its sister rivers became their lifeblood. They learned to carve stone and shape copper, to read the flow of stars for navigation. Yet as generations passed, some of them began to forget. The sun, so constant and powerful above their heads, drew their admiration. Some began to honor it as a sign of divine power, then as a being itself. The first seeds of idolatry found soil in their hearts, and they shaped symbols to represent what they once merely admired. Still, among them were righteous men who kept the truth alive, descendants who remembered the teachings of Nuh and whispered his name in prayer when idols rose on the horizon. And so, even in the lands of the sun, the shadow of faith endured. The line of Japheth, or Japheth, the wanderers of the wind. Japheth, the youngest, was strong and quiet, his eyes set on the distant horizons. His people traveled northward and eastward, through forests of cedar, across cold plains, and over the mountains that touched the sky. They were hunters, craftsmen, and seekers of unknown lands. Theirs was a hard life, snow and silence, long nights under pale stars. Yet in that stillness they learned patience, unity, and strength. From Japheth's line would rise the tribes of Central Asia, the people of the steppes, and eventually the great nations of Europe and the East. They became builders of fortresses and discoverers of metals. Their tongues split into countless languages, and their songs carried the echo of ancient journeys. Some among them remembered Nuh and spoke of a great father who saved the world from water. Others turned his memory into legend, calling him the King of the Ark, a half-human, half-divine figure. And so the story of Nuh, once a revelation, began to drift across cultures, changing shape but never dying. The seeds of division. At first, the descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth traded peacefully. They met in the open plains, exchanging grain for metal, stone for cloth. But with time, pride began to rise. "Are we not the chosen of Nuh?" said one tribe. "Are we not the masters of the rivers?" said another. "Are we not the conquerors of mountains?" said a third. And thus for the first time since the flood, the old poison returned, the pride of men, the worship of self. They began to speak different tongues, not just in sound, but in spirit. Unity fractured into rivalry, and faith gave way to ambition. Some rulers demanded to be worshipped, others raised monuments to their own glory, forgetting the lesson of the waters that once swallowed an entire world. In the midst of this growing arrogance, the sky remained silent, watching, waiting. The first kingdoms. Generations passed, and the children of Nuh became many nations. They built cities with towers that touched the clouds, and palaces of marble and gold. Among these rose the first great city after the flood, Babylon, a marvel of stone and ambition, built upon the plains where Shem's descendants once prayed in humility. In its beginning, Babel was a place of learning. Scholars studied the stars, artisans sculpted beauty, and elders spoke of divine wisdom. But as power grew, reverence faded. Kings arose who declared themselves divine. The stars were no longer studied to glorify God, they were read to control destiny. The people who once bowed in gratitude now bowed to idols shaped in their own image. Still, among them were few, the silent faithful, who carried the ancient words of Nuh in their hearts. They would look upon the towers and whisper, "Man builds high, but God looks higher." The silent watcher. High above the earth, beyond the veil of clouds, the angels who had once witnessed the flood looked down. They saw mankind rise again, the same pride, the same folly, the same forgetting. But they also saw something else, the persistence of faith, faint yet unbroken, passed from father to son, from prophet to prophet. The voice of truth would not die, it only waited for its next bearer. For from the line of Shem, generations later, another light would rise, a prophet named Ibrahim, or Abraham, who would call the world once more to the remembrance of the One. But that is another chapter in the endless story of mankind's test, a story not written in ink, but in time, in stone, and in the beating hearts of those who still remember.